We would now, as I've mentioned, like to move into the congressional debate, and I would like to acknowledge our timekeepers that will be sitting on the front row to kind of keep us on course, and they are Adrielle Herring, Eli Herring, and Jenna Brown. So thank you, timekeepers. I know our moderators will be watching for you, and then we would like to invite our moderator, Randy Wright, if he would come forward, and also our candidates that will be debating today, the incumbent, Chris Cannon, and the challenger, John Jacobs. Gentlemen, if we could have you join us on the stage. Now, as Ms. Connors noted, this is a nonpartisan event, and so we have also invited other candidates that are running for this office. There are 3 other individuals, besides a Republican representative, that will be figuring in this race after the primaries, and they are representatives from the Libertarian Party, and we have the candidate with us today, Philip Hallman. There will be a representative from the Democratic Party, Christian Burridge, and finally there will be a representative from the Constitution Party, Jim Norlander, who will be represented by Ed McGarr. And after the debate, we will invite these gentlemen to come forward and address the audience for 2 minutes each, so you'll have an opportunity at least to meet them, to get a sense of their platform, and to have that opportunity. Let me take just a moment to introduce our moderator for this event. It is Mr. Randy Wright. Randy is the executive editor of the Daily Herald. He has been in the newspaper/journalism business for some 25 years. He has spent time with the New York Times, the San Diego Union Tribune, and the Arizona Daily Star. He is a native of Provo and decided to return to Utah County in 1992, and of course is currently in his position at the Daily Herald. So we are pleased to welcome Randy Wright as our moderator, who will kind of explain to you how the proceedings will go, and will moderate this debate, and of course we'll especially welcome our candidates. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this debate. I'd like to first of all introduce the candidates. To my immediate left is 5-term incumbent Congressman Chris Cannon, and next to him is Eagle Mountain businessman Mr. John Jacob. It's been a very interesting race so far. Now, the Daily Herald has had its turn asking questions of the candidates in an earlier debate. And so the questions today were submitted by voters. And also we're keeping, collecting the cards from the audience, and we will be incorporating your questions into this debate. The general rule of thumb will be 1-minute answers from the candidates, but we're going to allow them to rebut and have a little bit of time and flexibility to interact with one another if they choose. So without further ado, gentlemen, we'll go straight to 1-minute opening statements. We'll start first with Congressman Cannon.
Thank you, Randy. I want to thank you and for the Daily Herald. I understand the debate we did is going to be up online over the weekend, and I think that would be interesting. I appreciate your involvement here today. We want to thank CNN for being here today. I think that that is highly interesting. This race, as Mr. Jacob had a press conference yesterday where he talked about the national importance of this race, and it is clearly that, and we appreciate CNN coming out today and being here with us and focusing on that. We also have Christian Burridge over here. Christian is the Democrat running in this race. I suggested he come up and join us, but the Libertarian, Mr. Holman, is probably not here. And oh, well, welcome. You know, let me just ask the organizers of the event, since we talked about it, and the reason for it not having Mr. Burridge up is that Mr. Holman didn't have the opportunity to be here. I personally think it's a great idea to have both of them up, and principally because of the nature of the national focus of this debate. which is a schismatic approach to the Republican Party. We're going to split or not. And frankly, I beat an incumbent who is a Democrat because of a nasty primary in the Republican Party. And we have a Democrat in the 2nd District because of a nasty Republican primary there. I think it's actually highly appropriate that the two of them join us, Randy.
Congressman,
okay.
we appreciate your broad-mindedness very much. And I think we'll stick with our original plan because we don't know who they're running against. We need to settle that question first, I believe.
They're running against the Republican Party. I did my best, Christian.
Thank you for the suggestion. Mr. Jacob, 1 minute opening statement, please.
You know, Chris made a good point. The nation's eyes are on Utah. It's nice to have that finally happen. When we elect a president, the Republican president doesn't come to Utah because they know they've got our vote, and the Democrat president doesn't come to Utah because they know they do not have our vote. Either way, we feel like stepchildren. I want you to know that your vote will be noticed in Washington, D.C. It'll be noticed across the nation. And if you want to change, vote for me. If you want things to stay the same, vote for Chris. So that's what your choices are. And it's nice to have that the Democrats would come watch and see what the nation is going to see as well. It's nice to have them here. Chris had his opportunity to go to Richfield to debate both I and Christian, but he's right. Randy's right that we don't know who that challenger is. Isn't that fun? In America, we have that right. We need to be. We have the opportunity to vote and not have a bloody battle. You have the ability to change who's in charge by going in and choosing with your vote. You have the opportunity to look that up and find out who you care about and what you want to do. And that's America, and we love America. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I should just announce that the other candidates from the other parties will be given an opportunity at the close of the debate to say a few words. Let's go right into the debate questions proper. The first two deal with education. Candidates, if you would please assess the performance of the Department of Education since it was made cabinet level in the 1970s. Should it continue? The first question goes to first to Mr. Cannon.
Thank you. We created the Department of Education to add another layer of overhead and burden to teachers. I'm not sure it's done any good, and I think in the context of No Child Left Behind, it's become clear that it's done a great deal of bad, and that's, I think, consensus. Now, the question is where do we go with it, and frankly, at one point in time, I put in a couple of calls to the person in charge of No Child Left Behind because I wanted to know if what he was really trying to do was this sort of a under-the-radar attempt to get rid of or charge up our base, the Republican base, and get rid of the Department of Education. We never connected, and I found out later that he actually really believed the things that he was promoting. But after having had Ken Myers out here, an assistant secretary in the Department of Education, promising us here in Utah before the election that we were going to have great opportunities for waivers, seeing waivers go piecemeal to other states but not coming to Utah, I think it's absolutely clear that the arrogance of a department in Washington is only a matter of interfering with our schools and our teachers in Utah and not helpful at all. And, as a manager, I think you have to conclude it ought to just be eliminated.
Thank you. Mr. Jacob.
Thank you. With the Department of Education, you can see a perfect example of what's taking place with No Child Left Behind. I don't know of any teacher that likes No Child Left Behind. I know very few parents that like it. In fact, everyone that talks to me would like to see it disappear. A perfect example is they're supposed to give us in the state 8% of the amount to handle No Child Left Behind and have 100% of the control. That sounds like the way the government at a national level is trying to handle things. And if I get back there, I'll do everything I can to make sure that the states get control again of the education, that the parent and the child get back into the ability to help with education, that it's not the teacher's fault because a child may not learn. I had a teacher come to me, and she was a second grade teacher. She said, I have 28 students. 20 of them speak Spanish. 4 of them speak no English at all. I'm so busy teaching to the test, I have no time to teach the children. I need you to know that the education department needs to be as close to the people as possible, as close to the parent and the child as possible. And even though it was put together to solve one problem, it's created 20 others, and if it's allowed to continue, it will ruin a whole generation of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman, rebuttal?
Thank you. Of course, being a federal department, it's not close to anybody, and the arrogance blinds it to any activity. If you're interested in helping get rid of the Department of Education, go to my website, which is endfeded.com. endfeded.com, and join the force to turn that around. We're especially reaching out to teachers who are irritated and frustrated by the Department of Education. And so if you're a teacher, especially if you know a teacher and who's frustrated, have them go to endfeded and sign up, and we'll help get rid of the Department of Education.
Mr. Jacob.
Yeah, we were told that the Department of Education hasn't actually funded No Child Left Behind, and that in 2008, the No Child Left Behind actually comes up for vote again. And what we need to do, there's over 40 states that would not like to have it continue, and what we need to do is have it so the states have those rights back again. And again, that's what I will propose. Thanks.
That's a little bit of a segue into this next question, and you've partially answered it, but you may want to add to it. Without dealing with the obvious issue of underfunding, do you agree in principle with the No Child Left Behind Act as a federal mandate, or other federal mandates beyond that? Mr. Jacob.
Actually, I don't. The principles of having the government control our lives is pretty harsh. It was interesting. I was able to go to a fundraiser for Mitt Romney the other day, and he said that Jake Garn, one of our previous senators, and made the statement that there's 3 things government ought to do. The first is to protect our country, protect our borders. The second is to deliver the mail, and the third is to get the heck out of our lives. And I think that what we need to do is we need to make it so that the government does not control our lives, that we have the right and we should be the ones that make the decisions in our lives. And to have the concept that from one level they can mandate and they can determine what we're going to do, it doesn't work. How many of us have children? How many of them actually think and do the same thing? How can you teach all of them the same and have all of them on the same level? Every child should excel. The mandates back there in Washington, D.C. should cease, and the state should have more rights. Thank you.
You know, I said earlier that there's a schismatic force trying to break the Republican Party apart. We're actually held together by many fundamental principles that we cherish. It's awful that we have some peripheral things that tend to take us apart. One of those principles that we cherish is that government is best at the local level, and that the federal government is made up of bureaucracies which tend to absorb more and more power over time, and the only thing that's immortal among mankind is bureaucracies. And they grow and they continue and they are arrogant. In the case of Secretary Spellings, she refused to meet with Patty Harrington, our superintendent of education in the state of Utah. She actually refused to meet with her, despite the fact that they were in the same city, attending a convention on education, and we had promises from the Department of Education before the election. That arrogance is absolutely astounding, and that arrogance comes from Republicans. It comes from a Republican Secretary of Education. What happens when the other side is in control? So yeah, we need to take the opportunity to move away from centralized government and functions that don't make sense in the federal government and toward people running their own lives. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the audience to cooperate in the interest of time. If you could hold your applause until the end of the debate, it'd be much appreciated. I think we can move through the questions more rapidly. Next question. This involves natural resources in Utah. Congressman Cannon first. With oil now hovering around $70 a barrel, what should the government be doing to tap the vast western reserves of oil shale and tar sands estimated at 1 trillion barrels? That's triple the reserves of Saudi Arabia. And what about environmental concerns?
Well, you know, no people on earth are more environmentally sensitive than we are here in Utah. You can't find a coal mine in Utah without a map, because we're just very careful about how we treat the environment. That was led by Brigham Young, the Moses of the American West, and he was as radical an environmentalist as you could be. But we also believe that we have resources that are God-given that we should develop for the benefit of mankind. One of the very first things I did when I got elected to Congress was to stop the Bureau of Land Management from spending $40 million to shut the White River mine that had about a $200 million spent to develop it, because I'd hoped someday we'd have the opportunity to have oil out of that shale. Now, there's a group that has produced a significant amount of oil for a significant period of time and tested a theory, and they're now going to, as soon as they get enough shale out of that mine, which has been released, they're going to open that up and go to a much larger scale plant. Within a year, we could be producing oil at $25 or less per barrel out of shale. And the cool thing about shale oil is it's like jet fuel when it comes out and doesn't need to be refined much more. So it would be a huge boon to Utah, to America, and to the known world.
Thank you. Mr. Jacob.
Thank you. What's interesting is that I had a constituent that was an oil man from Utah that told me that in the Wolverine find that we have in central Utah, separate from the trillion barrels that's already locked up in shale, that we have more oil than Texas does. To just help you understand that, we gave extra money to our state of $900 million to $1 billion this year. In Texas, just off oil, I was told by the oil man that they gave their state $59 billion. Can you imagine what that will do to Utah in the future? We have a tremendous amount of energy. We have gas. The laws back in Washington, D.C. are preventing us from using that. The other thing is, if you look at it, who makes money when you buy gas at the gas pump? The oil company. They get 7 cents a gallon. Where's their incentive to do anything else? Where's their incentive to build anything else? The government gets from 25 cents to 65 cents per gallon. Where's their incentive to do anything else? We need to build incentives to build up and to figure out how to use our oil shale and other things. And I feel like they may already have the answer, and we need them to use it and to make it better. And we need to eliminate the use of oil in other countries. We need to start developing our own oil. Anwar is another place we could do that.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon, you have another comment.
I think this is one of those areas where we probably don't have much disagreement. I think the real issue here is who's going to be more effective in helping to move these kinds of issues forward. I chair the Western Caucus. We're the people that do energy in America, and we've been quite successful in helping that be the case. One other issue that I think is very important here, though, is that if you're a private company and you have a choice to do work on a federal lease or to work on a school trust lands lease, where are you going to go? One of the things we need really to do very importantly in this regard is to help develop the school trust land consolidations so that we can actually develop oil shale here without federal intervention and in a way that puts a lot of money in our schools. The only thing we can do at the federal level to really actually help in Utah is to help consolidate our trust lands so that fund goes from $750 million or so to $7 or $10 or $15 billion, and that's possible if we do our school trust lands and our oil shale development right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Chris. I think that it's important to find out who can do the most, and what you need to know is I am very good at water. I develop water. I know more about water than any of our congressmen. And if we're going to be able to develop oil or anything else in Utah, we're the second driest state in the nation. And what we need is help in developing our water resources. In Sand Peak County, they've had for 73 years that they haven't been able to put in a dam up there and bring water to that area that's been promised to them. Other county up there, Carbon, has been fighting it. They got what they needed, and then they've been fighting it. That needs to happen. There's a pipe that needs to come into southern Utah. We can help by getting easements across federal lands, and we have water that's trying to be taken to Las Vegas that's going to affect the Snake Valley. That's very important to Milford County, and there's things that need to be done there. There's a lot of things that I can do, whether I'm the head of the Western Caucus or not.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question, first to Mr. Jacob, new topic. Methamphetamine abuse is a huge problem, especially affecting women. With certain ingredients restricted in the United States, a black market of very potent meth has emerged from Mexico. What should the federal government do about this and other drug problems?
They should secure our borders. It's about time that we secure our borders. The first thing that I said when I started was we should secure our borders. I've heard many people from both sides say that I really didn't look at the illegal immigration issue. What I said is it was not going to be the only issue. There's many issues that happen here, but drugs are being brought across. And to me, that's a national security problem. We're in other countries protecting them. Why can't we protect our borders? We need to do that. We need to do it now. It's the first thing they should put on the plate. And in my opinion, it's the only thing they should do until they get those borders secured. And we don't just have southern borders, we have northern borders and oceans.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, the meth is I don't know if you all are familiar with it, is a horrible drug. It causes incredible damage in a very, very short period of time. It's addictive after one use, many people say. It's had a horrible effect on America. I started the meth caucus in Congress. We've done a lot. We had a hearing with 18 witnesses from the administration that led to this is not a committee hearing, by the way. This is a caucus hearing. The first time we've actually had a caucus hearing in Congress. That led directly to the passage of the meth bill that we passed last year, which has had a remarkable effect already in reducing the effects of methamphetamine in America. So this is we have many problems in America. We have many, many problems. I've voted to allow the military to be used on the border since I got into Congress. I voted 5 times to do that. Bill Clinton was not interested in that and was more involved in the impeachment for much of that time. After we recall that he had required the INS to naturalize 1 million citizens, 70,000 of whom turned out to be violent criminals. So we actually couldn't get that priority taken care of then. And we've been pounding on this administration since they came into office to, in fact, take care of the borders. And that has now begun with our Utah National Guard guys on the border today building a fence.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the hot question of the day, which is illegal immigration. First question to Congressman Cannon. Immigration reform has split the Republican Party. As shown by Utah's own delegation, Senator Bennett voted yes, Senator Hatch voted no. The measure passed in a bipartisan vote of 62 to 36, with 31 of the 36 noes being Republicans. What are the implications for, with this issue for the Republican Party in the November election?
Well, that's why CNN is here. This is a very schismatic issue. Let me read you from the redstate.com blog. I love these guys. These are the real Republicans. By Art Rasputin. I used to be a big Tancredo fan, but he's gone so far off the deep end that I can no longer support him. I was hoping his bashing of fellow conservative Mike Pence was just a temporary lapse of good sense. But the fact that the leadership PAC he founded and runs with Babe Buchanan is pushing to defeat a solid conservative Republican like Chris Cannon just because he doesn't line up with their version of being a good American is outrageous. And then he goes on to describe do an email that comes from Babe Buchanan about how they need to bash me. And it goes on to, Babe Buchanan quotes columnist John Fund of the Wall Street Journal, who says, illegal immigration is the key issue in this, the Cannon race, and should 5-term incumbent Representative Chris Cannon of Provo Mapleton, by the way, although I love Provo, lose to a restrictionist challenger, look for House Republicans to dig in their heels and block any bill that creates a path to citizenship for illegal aliens. Now, let me just tell you that the path to citizenship that the Senate is talking about is not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because I've worked to stop that for a very long period of time. But we have a second tier of people who live clandestinely in enclaves. They don't learn English, they don't participate in society, and they create crime. We need to solve this problem, and this race is important because if we don't solve this problem now, it will not be solved for a generation, and we will do nothing about the 12 or 20 million people who are here illegally in America today, and that is a cancer eating at the very core of the fiber of our American being.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob, and we'll add a little time to match that.
Thank you. You know, I think that I like to quote other people that we read as well. There's a pathway to citizenship and political extinction on by Don Feder on the frontpagemagazine.com, and it says that Chris Cannon makes Senator McCain look like Tom Tancredo. So it's kind of interesting to see that there are things that, no matter how you want to look at it, that you come up with different opinions. You say that this is splitting the Republican Party. I think we need to make sure the Democrat Party realizes that even though there might be a difference here in Utah, the person who's going to win is going to be a Republican, and that they are more liberal on illegal immigration than anybody. So if they think they're going to get an advantage by what happens in Utah, they're wrong. The other thing is that, Chris, when you were on Rod Decker's show on May 9th, Rod asked you, do you honestly, as Chris Cannon, believe that illegals should go home? And your statement was, no, absolutely not. So if you're not for the center and for having the guest worker program, what are these 12 million people going to do while they're here if you aren't going to allow them to go home?
Thank you. That's a good segue into my next question, actually, and I think you'll be able to address this. And I believe this will go to Mr. Jacob first. Regardless whether it is the right thing to do or not, is it feasible to identify and deport 12 million illegal immigrants who are in the U.S. today?
I think that's the problem the Washington, D.C. has had. They can't see a way to get that done. They need other people there to be able to see that. For example, the concept that everything about illegal immigration is wrong. The concept that businesses cannot exist without illegal immigrants here. Well, they existed before they came. And the idea that we might have a 3.5 jobless rate here in Utah, which is almost zero, is what we want. We want to raise the wages in Utah. We want to be able to afford to have our families without having to have 2 jobs. We can have other people in other states come here to get jobs. There's a lot of things that are very positive about that, and it is very feasible. I didn't pay for these illegal immigrants to get here. I don't see why it's our responsibility to pay for them to get home. And if you don't think it can be done, well, Mexico did it. They got rid of 12 million people.
Ladies and gentlemen, please hold the applause if you would.
Thank heavens we're not Mexico. Mexico hurts people at their southern borders. Mexico is a corrupt state. 10 or 12 years ago, Time magazine ran a cover story about governments that were in danger of becoming criminal, and Mexico led the list. The cost of being sheriff in that article of Baja California was $500 million. In other words, the person who ran law enforcement in Baja California had to extort $500 million out of the people in Baja California in order to retain his job. There's something very sick about Mexico, and we are not Mexico, and we don't want to become like Mexico, but we do have a problem. Now, in this debate, it is easy to say things and take things out of context. Alex Segura, who is the head of the Utah Minutemen, the guy who is trying to guard the border down in Arizona and other places, was actually in that Rod Decker show, and he agreed with me. So what I said was not outrageous as it was just presented, is that my position is we need to protect the border. We need to do something in America. We have a huge disagreement here, and that disagreement is whether the Republican Party is going to be some kind of new xenophobic, anti-foreigner party, or whether they're going to be the party of a country that we're thrilled has grown, where business has grown, where business has created new jobs, and with that comes problems that we need to solve. We absolutely need to solve this cancer that's among us, but it is a problem that has grown over time, and And if you want to be simplistic and vote for a simplistic solution, then you're probably not going to vote for me. But if you care about this issue, I hope you get out and vote, because I want to solve it. And I want to solve it in a way that gets us out of the bollocks of 12 million people who are undermining our legal system, our rule of law here in America.
Thank you.
I don't blame them for wanting to applaud. It's kind of fun. So, quickly, you need to know, Chris, that it's not anti-foreigners. We love legal immigrants. It's strictly the word illegal that we don't like. Okay? And so, and we need to follow the rule of law. That's what we're here for. And I guess what's happening, and one of the reasons CNN is here, is because it's being told that if I win, then we're going to put our heels down and say no guest worker program. And if you win, the Senate gets more of its way, and Social Security will be used by people who are illegally here, and they then get a free pass and a free ticket, and that's wrong.
Congressman.
Let me just point out that I don't think you are a racist or a xenophobe, but the people who
You
are
know
supporting
I'm not,
you,
Chris.
I just said that. The people who are supporting you, this is Babe Buchanan, talking about as many guest workers there. Why wait 20 years? We will be overrun in months. Now, and that's talking about a legal program. That's what happens if the Senate bill passes. She is a xenophobe, and she's talking like she is one. And talk about schismatic, she goes on to say, but if conservative Republicans let the Pence plan become law, we should organize to throw out every one of them in November. Now, that is schismatic. And what we need to do in America is solve a very difficult problem, not with platitudes, because you said, you've called my position amnesty many times. The question is not whether it's amnesty, but what do we do? Because those things that most Americans believe are amnesty, that is the path to citizenship that the Senate is talking about, I have opposed that forever, and I have a record of that. So why don't we stop focusing on platitudes and hiding behind, if you yourself are not a xenophobe, hiding behind the xenophobes, and start talking about what you would do. Make a proposal like the Pence proposal so we can look at it and say, would that work, and we want to vote for that.
Thank you. We'll get into some of these issues, I promise. But I've just received a card. I can't resist asking this question. Have either of you ever employed an illegal alien?
I have not.
Not to my knowledge. I have had where I've got people who are legally here and I employed them. And I have had where I took them to a attorney that is that works with aliens or works with people who are trying to immigrate to our country. And I found out that the only way these people could stay in the country to be able to finish their college, because they couldn't make enough at working, was to end up having them start a company, work at that company, pay into the company so they could pay legal taxes. And I with my vote, decided that I would help someone so they could become an American, because that's what they wanted to do. And then that cost me quite a bit of money. I believe that's my right as an individual to do. But as a congressman, as your representative, it is not my right to take your money and do that with other people.
Thank you. The compromise bill was, or position was brought up. Let's go first to Mr. Jacob. Representative Mike Pence of Indiana recently came out with a Republican compromise position on immigration. In the bill, private enterprise plays a role in facilitating temporary workers, and certain features of President Bush's plan are removed. Where do you stand on this compromise?
I think it's a lot closer to where we need to get. I think I'm between him and Tancredo. One of the problems is they're talking about setting up like an Ellis Island in other countries. I think it's a good idea because I believe other countries are pretty corrupt and they've been controlling people getting into America, and they might be siphoning off money and other things that hurt those people. But I think the people who have been standing in line for years trying to do it the right way should be there first in line, not people who have broken our laws and come into our backyard. So I think that there's more things that need to be dealt there, but it makes more sense than anything that I've seen in the Senate bill, and I feel like that's probably a good approach.
Thank you. Congressman.
I'm actually astonished by that response because, of course, the schismatic wing of the Republican Party is saying that Pence is vile, he's amnesty within an amnesty. Tancredo used that term, the non-amnesty amnesty. The only difference between what Pence is suggesting and substantive difference between that and the Senate bill is that you have a private firm doing this. The Senate bill is anticipating that people will leave the country, at least they're expecting that to happen in conference. The other difference is which Pence does not deal with, is what the Senate called the path to citizenship, which I oppose, which is 6 million or 12 million people 6 years from now get to come forward and because they were here for 5 years and a day get to have citizenship or get to have legal permanent residency. That's the problem that I think I oppose as amnesty if you carve it down. I just don't understand how you could possibly say anything nice about the Pence bill and then say somehow you're going to do something better or more or different from what I would do in Congress and what I have been doing for the last 9 years on this issue, including securing the border.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Chris has the advantage on me. All I get to learn about the Pence bill is I get to read what I read in papers, and I believe what they're telling me is correct. I have no way to follow up on it otherwise. I do not have access to Pence, and I haven't had that bill so that I can find out exactly what it is. And my understanding is, and what I was suggesting is my understanding is on the Pence bill, they have to go back. And it's definitely not what Chris has been talking about, saying that they would go back. And I will repeat it again. Do you feel like, Chris, honestly, that these people go back? And you said, no, absolutely not. And so when you turn around and say that this leads to something like citizenship, my goodness, if these people are here and they have the right to be here, why can't they be like us and be American citizens? If they're actually going to come here and we have to have them to make it so our jobs work, why shouldn't they be American citizens?
Thank you. Mr. Cannon?
Well, you know, we give out about 675,000 visas. All of them are temporary, with the exception of a few permanent, legal permanent resident visas. And so I don't see much of a distinction between a temporary worker program and any other kind of temporary visas. But we'll have to go back and see what was actually said. That was taped with Rod Decker. And I think that if the issue is going back for a day or not going back for a day or going back for 3 days, as the Pence bill anticipates, that there's not much difference. In other words, I don't see a big moral value in going across the border. But this issue and the extreme statements about this issue, including the one you just made, is the divisive part. I will tell you that I do know Mike Pence. I'm on the Republican Study Committee. I voted for him for chairman of it. He's doing a great job. He came up to me on the floor the other day and he said, I don't know how you do this, Chris. You've been suffering these slings and arrows for years. I came out with what I thought was a creative, helpful approach, and they had to turn their telephones off and send them to an answering machine because they got inundated from people who are driven by fear. They're driven by fear instead of looking at America as the wonderful, great land that it is, the land of opportunity, the land where people can come and make something of themselves, the land where no other country is in the ballpark of developing good things for humans all over the world as we are in America. And I think we ought to be focused on what Ronald Reagan would have wanted for the Republican Party. I think that the amnesty that he signed into law was a mistake. But he was not a xenophobe. And there are many people out there that are angry and fearful, and that's not the best of America. The best of America is to embrace the future and to be creative and helpful, unleash the resources that we have so that all people can be blessed with them.
Mr. Jacob, would you like a quick word to even the time?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Next question. This will go first to Mr. Cannon. Some illegal immigrants have been here for 2 or 3 generations. Many of their children and grandchildren are Americans. How would you solve the problem that 3 million children whose parents are illegal are themselves U.S. citizens by birth? Should the law on citizenship be changed to parentage rather than birthplace?
You know, this is actually more complicated than it would seem on the surface because of this 14th Amendment that actually created the context of citizenship based upon birthplace. It is problematic. My wife's father was one of the first maculadors under the old Kennedy program in the 60s, and we've known families and people across the border for a long period of time. We know people who are millionaires whose daughters come to America to have their babies in the emergency room in San Diego General because it's free, and that's a problem for us, by the way, and it's the best medical care you can get, and finally the kid is a citizen, or at least has the choice when he becomes 18 to become a citizen. This is a terrible problem. It's a constitutional problem. Dan Lundgren has taken the leading oar on trying to figure out what we do with what we call anchor babies to see if there's a way we can legislatively deal with it, because I don't think that we're going to be able rally enough support to do a constitutional amendment. So if Dan comes up with that, that'll be part of the bill, and that's something I'd vote for, but I'm not sure we can get there.
You know, there's been some question about whether I have vacillated or finally learned about illegal immigration in the last couple months because it's a weakness that Chris has. And I've always been strong against illegal immigration and against breaking the law. One of the things that I was in favor of is the babies that are born on American soil, that they would be Americans because it's in our Constitution. It is actually there, it's part of it, and trying to change that, that's one of the few laws we actually obey on illegal immigration. And so it's been very hard for me because I did not believe that it's something we could change. Since learning more about this, I'm thinking that there might be some way that we have to address this when people are not on a legal visa, they're not here legally, that there could be something there addressed, that those babies that then are born with the intent that the only reason they're here is so they can be a citizen of America. I think that needs to be addressed, and I honestly don't have the answer of how to do that yet.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon first. Many illegal immigration plans or reforms have been discussed over the decades. Some things have been enacted. Why has enforcement by the government seemed so lacking, and will history repeat itself this time?
Yeah, there are a couple of major issues there that you ought to consider. In the first place, in 1986, we didn't have the computing capacity to figure out who was who, so people made assertions of who they were, and they were never checked, and so you had many more people get the benefit of that act than we anticipated. Today we have computer programs of all the fingerprints of every criminal that's ever been charged at a state or a federal or a local level. We have Social Security data. Lars Larson the other night, I was on his show and we had a great conversation. He said, why can't we just do this? This is off the air, by the way. Simply, and he pointed out that we have Social Security and IRS records. I said, we spent $5 billion on the IRS trying to get the 4 segments of the IRS to communicate, and at the end of the $5 billion, it didn't work. There was no benefit from that $5 billion that we spent. So we have databases, we're moving in the right direction, but what we do in this bill is going to be fundamentally different from what we did in 1986 because we have the ability to identify people. The other problem that we've had is the naturalization of 1 million people under the Clinton mandate, and that almost destroyed an organization that was in bad shape. Anyway, this is an organization that runs on paper, and whatever we do with this program, if we get a temporary worker program, is going to have to rely heavily on computers and digital activity rather than paperwork.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Many plans or reforms on illegal immigration have been discussed over the decades. Why has enforcement by the government seemed so lacking, and will history repeat itself this time?
The answer is they don't fund it. They keep giving us mandates without funding them. I actually had a ticket that was given to me by an Arizona policeman as I was traveling from Utah to Vegas. And he said that he had a truckload of illegal immigrants that he had pulled over, and when the ICE came to pick them up, they said, turn them loose, we don't have the money to take them back across the border. There was a constituent that I knew that said one of his best friends was on first names basis with the people that he was flying back from St. George to Mexico because one of them was on the border on the plane for the 15th time. Our government is not taking care of this problem. Since Chris has been there, we've gone from 5 million illegal immigrants to over 12 million illegal immigrants in 10 years. I can't do worse than that. We need to fund it. We need to use the computers that we have. We need to do things that get our local enforcement involved. Right now we're being invaded, and if we allow this to continue, what will happen if we do a worker program? What will happen is we will have 50 million illegal immigrants, not just 12.
I'm actually quite sure you could do worse. And among other things, let me talk about funding, because that's really a core issue. In the first 5 years I was in Congress, we doubled the funding for enforcement at the border. Didn't have enough of an effect because the INS is such a fouled-up organization and was deeply troubled during the Clinton administration. In the last 2 appropriation cycles, we've ordered the President, that is the House, and in part because I've been on that committee, I've been involved in ordering the president to add 2,000 Border Patrol agents per year. He's refused to do that. He's now done that. We've made available to the president the ability to use the military on the border, getting beyond the posse comitatus limitation there, and he hasn't done that. So we've focused on it. The fact is, Congress is not a place where you make something happen. Congress is a place where you appropriate and set the rules, and then somebody else, either a Democrat like Bill Clinton or our current president, has to do the implementation.
Thank you.
I have 30 seconds, right? You know, one of your early questions were how we're going to stop the drug problem because it's coming across the border. Right now, we're spending over $130-something billion in Iraq. I think that's what they raised the amount to help our troops. We must give our troops support. They took $2 billion of that and put it on our border. Is our border as important as Iraq? Why not $139 billion? I don't want to increase costs, but if there's one thing that our government should be doing, it's protecting our borders. It's national security. So doubling the money didn't work. I don't care if you have to 10 times the money, whatever it needs to happen. We cannot secure or end illegal immigration until we secure our borders. We need to do whatever it takes to do that, and that's one of the few things that our government is supposed to do for us.
Thank you. Next question to Mr. Jacob first. The word amnesty has become a hot button in the debate over immigration reform. Is it a useful concept or an oversimplification?
You know, I used to be an air traffic controller, and we had a numbering system there. We had to be very clear when we talked to the aircraft of what we were saying. Our numbering system was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. Do you know why we use 9er instead of 9? Because across the world, English is the language that's spoken for air traffic control, and 9 in Germany means no. So we have to be very clear on what we're saying. Right now, when they brought up the word amnesty, and the definition that Chris is using and even the president is using is different than what most of us understand. Amnesty to me is that we don't allow worker programs. We don't allow people who are here illegally to continue to stay here. If somebody steals a car and you penalize them and you charge them the $2,000 the Senate is trying to give, do you then give them the car once they get done with paying that $2,000 crime? Right now, if we use illegals in our worker amnesty without forcing them to go back, we are giving them the prize that they've won by doing things illegally.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon.
Well, I think here that was a response about amnesty that indicates the problem with the term and it having a different meaning for anybody who wants to focus on what he wants the meaning of amnesty to be. If the concern is getting a benefit from being in America and having the ability to become a legal permanent resident, you're right to condemn the Senate bill, which I have done. And by the way, there's a companion bill in the House, which I've refused to co-sponsor for the same reason. But if you're looking at how to create a program that works, let me just remind you that we had a Bracero program in the 50s. And in the 40s, during the war, we encouraged people to come from Mexico to fill jobs because Rosie the Riveter couldn't do them all. So we had a lot of people come illegally into the United States. And after the war, they found out that the post-war boom was really good and a lot more people came. We then did the Bracero program, and two interesting things happened. In the first place, illegal immigration fell to almost zero, almost overnight. And secondly, total immigration actually fell. And the reason it fell is because people knew that they could go home and visit their sick mother and come back because they had a visa. So you had a process that created a legal pathway for migration, movement back and forth. What we need is a system that does not benefit people who are here but doesn't penalize the economy at the same time. So saying if you're here for 6 years or 5 years like the Senate has said, I would call that amnesty. That's a big gimme, and $2,000 is less than you have to pay an attorney to get you the visa. So we agree on that version of amnesty, but there is no way that any reasonable person could look at my record on immigration and ever say that I've done anything that is supportive of amnesty. It is just not there, without demagoguing.
Thank you. Last question on this subject. First to Mr. Cannon. How do you respond, or how would you respond to some American businesses that object to tight restrictions on immigration and the prospect of being hit with heavy fines for hiring illegals?
Well, I don't know of any business that wants to avoid penalties for hiring illegals. What they want is a workforce, and they're very clear about that. This is not some kind of hidden thing. This is not Pat Buchanan's populism and hate for business. The fact is, in America, we don't have big businesses anymore. We do have companies like GM that are deeply troubled, but most Americans work for small companies, and most small companies need people to grow. And so business is very straightforward about this, and there's nothing hidden. What they want are fair and clear rules. They don't want somebody to come back in and say, you've got an illegal alien here, and you've spent $25,000 training him, tough luck, he's gone. What they want is a worker who will work and be here legally. There are almost no employers in America, except at the low end where they have no capital investment, who don't pay withholding taxes and FICA on their employees. They don't do it. They do it because they don't want, even if they think that the guy might be an illegal alien, they don't want to be guilty of doing something wrong. They just want their business to grow, and that's what we want America to do. As Republicans, it is fundamental. We want people to have opportunity. We want them to invest. We want them to have rules. They want a rule of law whereby they can invest and grow their business, and that's what the business community wants out of this issue.
You know, just a quick comment on the one before. I appreciate, Chris, that you have an opinion that you know what amnesty is. Every article that I read related to Chris in newspapers and others, the other people have that you believe amnesty is one thing and that you have been in favor of that. And I've heard you say that you're not in favor of amnesty. I have yet to see where that actually works. You have a definition for that, and that's what it is. As far as the question you just now asked, one of the problems we have is for businesses is that we had over 400 cases 3 years ago where people were sent back on illegal immigration. In the last year, it was 3. Our government is not enforcing the laws. There's no penalty for businesses. There's no penalty for them to do anything. And if they do get a penalty, it's much cheaper and much better for them to hire somebody at a lower wage and to have that greed and to be able to get by with that, even though they may be great workers, and have it, then the fine that they will get, and those fines aren't coming, they're not enforcing them. That's one of the reasons we're here. That's one of the reasons we're having the debate, and that's one of the reasons that I believe I'm going to win on the 27th.
Thank you. Let's move on to another topic. Let's look at health care. The first question here will go to Mr. Jacob. As the mandated costs of Medicare rise by some estimates to $32 trillion over the next 75 years, and with $8 trillion of that from the new Medicare drug program, how do you prevent what seems to be a looming catastrophe? Would you consider cutting benefits or means testing?
I think we ought to make incentives with it. I think that what's happened, I had the opportunity to talk to a person who has a savings program, which is part of insurance. And what happened is he went to the doctor. His daughter had sprained her ankle, and the doctor misunderstood and thought he said he had no insurance at all. And what happened was the doctor looked at it and said, we'll do the same things on your daughter on whether it's busted or not or sprained. We immobilize it, everything else. He didn't take the x-rays. He said, you have an ace bandage. They went through many things, and he was charged $50 instead of $200 to $300. And it was good for the person with a savings program. It was good for the doctor. It was good for all concerned. What we need to do is build incentives. We need to deregulate the insurance industry. We need to quit making it so the government is controlling everything that do with insurance, everything to do with our lives. They need to take and make incentives so that you will actually save money instead of trying to get the most money that you can. The doctor can get as much as $200 to $300 from insurance, and he's trying to do his job. He'll get sued if he isn't doing his job. The concept is build incentives that will decrease the costs and get rid of the trying to take advantage, and that's not happening right now.
Thank you.
You know, this is one of the areas where I don't think we have any disagreements. The real question is who's going to be more effective in these issues. I ran, as one of the things I really wanted to get done, was to get health savings accounts, then we called them medical savings accounts, in place, and this awkward bill that is going to cost a lot more money than anybody thought was a big piece of that. On the other hand, some really cool things are happening in medicine that are very helpful. We are getting more competition, and I think the costs are going to be readjusted downward. These estimates are going to be readjusted downward because there's more marketplace involved. The problem with that marketplace is that 60% of health care payments come from the federal government, either through Medicare or through the states in conjunction with the federal government through Medicaid. When you have a system like that, you can't change it with free market stuff. And so if you send me back to Congress and I ask for your vote, I want to go back there and help blow apart the system that is currently restricting the advances that we know about that we have in place. We want to make our medical research 10 times as effective. We can do that, I believe. We want to make that research available to people so they can take care of their own health care by having access to that information. We want to have a system where people can know what the charges are going to be before they go to the place where they're getting the services, and know that they're going to get a reasonable charge instead of being charged 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times as much as Medicare or Medicaid would pay. We do those things, and all of our health care is going to improve, and frankly, that means that Medicare and the drug prescription system is going to be very different in the future, and I suspect much less costly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, he says, who's going to be the most effective? Chris, in the whole time that I've debated with you, you've never denied that the 12 million to 20 million illegal immigrants are not going to stay here. And so the point that I'm getting at is right now, one of the things that I hear from a lot of people who are in the healthcare business, these people are using our services, and they're given the cards when they're not even legally here. And so I don't believe you're being effective. The government, as you've been there in the last 10 years, have not been effective at this. We care about people. We're not going to let them starve to death in our front yard. We need to take care of this problem and make sure that it goes away, not continue to give them the benefits that they have been receiving.
Well, if you want to throw the bums out, you can do that. The fact is, Congress is not made up of two homogeneous groups of people. They're made up of people that are striving, and others don't care, and others care a little bit, and others care in an opposite way. I've been effective in moving issues in the right direction, and these issues are particular issues that we've moved in. Among other things, if you want to help solve the problem of medical services going to illegal aliens, what we need is to have a program whereby those people have a requirement that they have health insurance, because then they won't go to our medical facilities, our emergency rooms, and suck up the resource. That way they'll be much more wise about how they use it. And by the way, you should all understand that if you care about medical costs, I shepherded through my committee, the Committee on Commercial and Administrative Law, the medical malpractice liability bill. If you care about medical malpractice liability and the cost that puts on your pocketbook, you should understand that we've done that. I've done it now several times in the House, and we're just waiting for the Senate to get on and do that. But it's a complicated world with 100 senators, all of whom think they're going to be the next president, and 435 congressmen who are like herding cats.
Mr. Jacob, you want a quick last word?
Yeah, and when we talk about throwing the bums out, I'm just working on one right now, Chris. Thanks. That was meant as a...
I thought I'd been kinder to you than that.
There's 2 more questions before, and then we'll go to the closing remarks. This one goes first to Congressman Cannon. What role, if any, should the federal government play in solving the problem of uninsured Americans, more than 45 million of them?
This is a huge problem, and when I went to Congress, 65% of Americans had health insurance from their employers, and 45% of Americans wanted socialized medicine. Today, 65% of people want socialized medicine, and only 45% have employer-based insurance. And the problem with that number is that for those of you who have increasing costs for your medical care, you know, you may have an employer who has a program, but it's getting much more costly for you. This is a huge problem in America today. What we need to do is change the nature of what we're doing with medical care. Mitt Romney's done a really interesting program in Washington, or in Massachusetts. He was in Washington recently and talked about it. And when he first described the program, it was pretty interesting, but it was before a Chamber of Commerce group, and some of the businessmen started asking questions, and you know what's going to happen there? There's going to be a state rigidity in medical care that I think is going to be very, very difficult. What we need to do is create an environment where we take away the medical or the federal constraints and let a market emerge. And when that happens, you're going to see medical savings accounts and other things work really well, and costs of medicine actually come down.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity to meet with Lisa King in Nephi, who's a small business owner. When I asked her, if I end up in Congress, what can I do for you? Her first question was, or statement was, I cannot get insurance for my employees because I do not have 15 employees. Help me so that I can do that. And then when I combine with other companies, we have a problem where we can't get a decent insurance rate because of 50 employees. She said, the backbone of America is small business, and yet the big businesses are the ones that get all the tax breaks. We need to deregulate insurance. When the government come in and created the insurance and said that you had to have special benefits, they ended up adding that if you have any problem, if you have high blood pressure, they can put on a 75% to 100% increase in your insurance, and you can't do better because of the laws that have been passed by Congress. Every time the government gets into our lives and tries to improve things, tries to improve one thing, they create 10 other problems. We need to deregulate insurance, not increase the laws. We need to get rid of the laws. We need to make it so that when you do your IRS and your other things, that it isn't that you have to read 50,000 plus pages and all kinds of books and hire an accountant to be able to do it. You shouldn't have to hire an attorney because you can't understand the laws that are being passed. We need to simplify these things. That's the best way to handle insurance.
Okay.
This follow-up?
Go ahead.
I think we agree on this issue. Get rid of the federal involvement. The question is who will do it better?
All right, well, let's go to the final question. First to Mr. Jacob. Republican lobbyist, now felon, Jack Abramoff, described the appropriations process as an earmark favor factory. If that's true, how should the system be fixed?
You know, that's a good question, because I'm obviously the one that's not the incumbent trying to get in. And, you know, for anybody to give me an endorsement that's in any kind of power, if I were not to win, then, you know, what happens then when Chris is upset with him because he's been in Congress for 10 years and all that power? And if you look at it, you look at a fundraiser that just happened in Washington, D.C. The other senators helped that. After the 27th, I think they're going to help me. One of the problems is that it does cost money to be in Congress. And unfortunately, people who want to make that change have that money and the rest of us don't. What's really fun is I know when a talk host across the nation has been talking, like last Thursday, we had $600 come in that were $20 and $25, $50 deposits from 4:15 to 5 o'clock because they were talking about our race. That, to me, is where the real rubber hits the road. That's where people across the nation are saying they want to change. And if you want to change, I'm not sure what we can do about Abramoff and about what things are going there, but I can tell you I'm losing a tremendous amount of money if I get this job from what I'm making now, and I'm still willing to go do that. I don't believe they can influence me.
Thank you.
You know, the interesting thing about the scandals you've heard about is that how many people are going to jail. You've got Abramoff in jail, you've got Duke Cunningham in jail. You have Congressman Jefferson, who had $100,000 of cold cash found in his freezer where he'd put a bribe, and 2 staffers who've already pleaded guilty and are going to jail. You're going to see other people going to jail. A couple of other staffers with delay are pleaded guilty and are going to jail. The fact is, we have laws that actually work here. And in an environment that is very complex, I don't know, the Founding Fathers were pretty wise people. They set up 2 houses, and the process for spending money is very, very complex. And so there is something you can do. That is get involved in politics, not just by being here, but by making small contributions, because in the end, tiny contributions from many people are going to be what saves America from the wealthy who have something clearly in mind when they make contributions. Now, in my case, we raise money. I only take money from people that I agree with, and people offer money because they know clearly where I stand. I ran for Congress as a consistent conservative. I have been conservative, and I think my record has been very, very consistent, and that makes it easier in many ways for me to raise money. But raising money, every reporter that's ever reported on this topic has pointed out that I hate raising money, and I hate raising money for that reason. I would love to have Utahns decide that they want to support people they believe in with small contributions and political activity.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chris, but you left the door open when you say you only take money from people you agree with. I think you gave money back to Jack, and I don't believe that he
I agree
influenced
with Jack.
you.
Jack is a great guy. Was a great guy. He got bent. And he gave, by the way, I don't appear on the charts of money that he got because it was
Indian
very small money.
tribes? This was my 30 seconds.
What about the influence?
Okay? This is my 30 seconds.
Oh, but you asked me.
I know, but you have 30 seconds to answer it, Chris.
Oh.
So there are Indian tribes that you receive from. I think that you get money from a lot of people, $20 and $50. How do you know what they're saying? How do you know that you agree with them? And there's no question that the money out there is something that affects politics. So my point is, if you agree with Chris Cannon, support him, because Utah has not been donating to his campaign, and you need to. If you're going to vote for him that heavily, support him. If you're going to vote for me and you want me, support me. Help us so that these things aren't controlling and that you have some of that interest in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon will give you the last word on this
Thanks.
one.
Thanks. And actually, I thought you were yielding time to me with that question.
I understand.
The system is not good, but in fact, Indian tribes agree with me because the ones that have money don't want other people competing with them, and so they give money to people that are anti-gambling, and that's a pretty straightforward fact. They also have many other interests before the Resources Committee that I serve on, and before the Government Reform Committee that I serve on, and also on the Judiciary Committee. So I think it's pretty clear that their reasons for giving, and would just say that still the world would be a much better place if American citizens got engaged in the process of contributing to political candidates who believed what they believe. And the way I know that somebody gives me $50, they believe what I believe because I have a long record, and they choose to do it.
Thank you, gentlemen. That concludes our questioning for today. We will now allow 1 minute each for closing statements. Since Congressman Cannon had the first opening statement, we'll give the privilege to Mr. Jacob for the closing.
Thanks. You know, I put together what's called a contract to Utah. It's called a letter of intent. You can see it on my website, electjohnjacob.com. Don't put an S on my name. You won't be able to find it, unfortunately. Somebody else owns that domain, and I don't have it. But on this, I actually talked to the constituents about what you wanted me to do for you in Congress. I think my greatest asset is you, the voter, you, the constituent. And I plan on meeting with every one of our state delegates every 3 months while I'm in, so that I can come back and say, this is what's happening in Washington, D.C. What do you think? What would you like to do? And having them respond. You know, when the majority of the people make the decision, then we're generally right. So on the 27th, whoever you're going to pick, Chris or I, we're both going to support each other because we want a Republican back in Washington, D.C. If you want to change, pick me. If you want things to stay the same, then you can pick Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
First of all, I'd like to thank CNN for coming. I think this has been an interesting debate. I hope you cut it kindly for me. Secondly, I want to thank Christian Burridge again for being here, and also Mr. Holman. I know that he's over there with his fingers crossed because we do have a couple of precedents here for people having these kinds of primaries and Democrats coming to the fore. And I suspect you're going to see other people out there with harsher messages over the next 2 weeks as we get close to the campaign. I hope you will look at my record, and if you have a question about my integrity, call me up and we'll walk you through the issues, because it's very open and very plain. The real question is who can do it best. You've got a complex situation in Washington, D.C. where any given voice is only effective to the degree he knows the interests of other players and has the experience with the issues and knows how the system works. I actually know how to do that. I'm about the fifth person, only about the fifth person from Utah to chair a committee. And I've used that committee chairmanship very effectively for the interest of Utah and for the interest of conservatives and Republicans. With that, let me just tell you that if you want school trust lands consolidated and lots more money in the school trust fund, please vote for me, because I want to go back there and continue doing that and continue the process that I've set up to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been very interesting. We'll now turn the time back to Citizens Resource, and Raylene Ireland will now introduce the other candidates from other parties for a few remarks. I'd like you to join me in a round of applause for our congressional candidates.
And thank you to our moderator, Randy Wright. As we indicated earlier, we're inviting representatives from the other parties who will be on the ballot in November to have an opportunity for a few moments, and the order of their appearance has been drawn in advance, so let me introduce first the representative from the Constitution Party. The name of the candidate is Jim Norlander. He will be represented today by Mr. Ed McGarr, who will have 2 minutes. Ed, welcome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to speak to you today, and I apologize for not being present. I'm speaking on behalf of Jim, by the way. I'm here. At this time, Jim is in Cleveland, assisting his family with the blessing of a grandchild. His name is Jim Norlander, and he's running for Congress in Utah's 3rd District. The low standards you see today in America, the out-of-control welfare state, the abortion issue, same-sex marriages, pornography, the $9 trillion national debt, and illegal immigration are all symptoms of a disease. The disease is socialism. What you're seeing today in America is the real result of 70 years of the New Deal, the New Frontier, the Great Society, orchestrated and administered by both major parties. I do not believe our great nation can be preserved if the present government policies are maintained. What we now have is a push for worldwide socialism, with America, you, footing the bill. I believe in building up our home defenses to the maximum extent necessary, but I do not believe that aggression should be carried on in the name of and under the false cloak of defense. I do not believe in setting up democracies around the world at the expense of the United States. Our constitutional form of government does not allow for such expressions, and it was the intent of our founding fathers to lead and teach by our example, not our involvement. I believe our real threat comes from within and not from without, and it comes from the underlying spirit of socialism, which robs the people of their liberties, which we possess under the Constitution. There's nothing worse in solving a problem than one not understanding the nature of the problem to begin with. The issue is not same-sex marriage. It's not gay clubs. Ultimately, the question that needs to come before the American people, and you here in Utah, is the Declaration of Independence our moral creed, or is it a historical artifact? Is the Declaration, will we be guided by the laws of nature and of nature's God or not? Will we support and vote for laws and policies that preserve, uphold, and defend our Constitution, our liberty, our borders, and our future? This election is not about making sure that our party of Utah stays in power so that we can support the president's agenda, or that we replace one party man with another. But wait, isn't a vote for Jim Norlander a wasted vote? I ask you to remember Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The commitment of the Founding Fathers is the calling of our time. The call is to unite not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans under a title of liberty. This is the first election where nobody has to vote for the best bad choice. The United States of America is a great nation, and it's worth saving. Please learn more about my platform by visiting my website at norlanderforcongress.com or go to cputah.org. There's a DVD that you can get there. There's a link to Jim's website, and there's his speeches and more of content about his campaign there. And I thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. McGarr, again representing Jim Norlander from the Constitution Party. Our next candidate will be from the Democratic Party, Christian Burridge. Mr. Burridge, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Christian Burridge. I'm running for United States Congress here in the 3rd District, and I'm proud to be the Democratic Party's nominee for Congress this year. I'm running because we need change here in Utah. We need an independent voice for someone that will represent the interests of Utahns. There's a myth that's been going around for quite some time that only conservatives can win in the 3rd District. But the fact of the matter is, we've had a great representative in the past by the name of Bill Orton, who won in many precincts with 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 margins all over this county. People from Utah are good, hardworking, educated, and dynamic people. We reject the condescending tone from the talking heads, from the national airwaves and such, that try to put us into a square peg and tell us what we do, how we're going to vote, how we're going to act. We Utahns vote for the person, we vote for the policies, and we vote for the ability to represent our people in a fair and just manner. I am that candidate. I am a candidate running for Congress that is interested in you. I am a local boy from Riverton, Utah. I went to BYU Law School, and I own a consumer rights practice. I own a law practice that stands up for the rights of human beings and individuals, and not big business interests and big special interests in Washington. And I intend to do the same thing as your congressman, to represent you as individuals, as an independent voice, not a partisan in Washington. I stand for change, and I stand up for our next generation. I stand up for our children so that they can have education that's worthwhile. I stand up for clean air and clean water. I stand up for fiscal responsibility, for it is my generation and the generations behind us that will have to pay it. It is long since time that the party in power right now has the label of fiscal responsibility. We need independent representatives that will stand up for the people of Utah and represent Utahns. I ask for your vote, I ask for your support, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak for you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. And finally, from the Libertarian Party, Mr. Philip Holman.
Hello, I'm grateful that we've had other third parties here. Sometimes I don't really feel welcome as a third party member when I show up places, and especially here it was kind of a uniparty debate, and I wish we could have got involved in that. Let me start just by quoting from Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. Just as he starts that government is best which governs least. Carry out, it finally amounts to this, which I also believe, that government is best which governs not at all. And when people are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government which they will have. I'm 27 years old. I recently graduated from college only 2 years ago. I'm still paying back my student loan. I know that right now in this country, between Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, we spend much more on people in the last 20 years of their life, by, I think, 80% than we do on people in the first 20 years of their life. I think that's wrong. We're underfunding our children. The national debt today, and I checked it, $8,376,508,411,210.39. Since September 30th, it has increased by 1.7 of 2005. It has increased by $1.7 billion per day. If we have a population of 300 million in the United States, that means every one of us has a debt of $30,000 that we owe to other countries. That's a lot of money, and we need to recognize that we are in bondage because we are allowing this huge debt to continue to mount. I thought it was great that we'd had victories in the House, the Senate, and also the executive. The spending has been beyond anything we've ever had in this country, beyond what FDR did. We have spent more in the last 8 years of this administration than any other president has spent. So much for fiscal conservatives. I weep for the days of Bill Clinton. He was much more fiscally conservative than what we have now, and I think that's very important to recognize. Electronic voting, I want to make voting over the internet, allow voting for that. I want to lower the voting age to 16. If we start teaching children when they're in high school to vote, civic responsibility, the lowest voter turnout, the lowest demographic is the 18 to 24-year-olds. If we drop the lower voting age, we'll have more voters. I believe in the motto, one person, one vote, actually, but I will propose an amendment to change the voting age to 16. The war was conspicuously absent from this. I believe that war is brought upon us. It is not a good thing to have war. and we need to flee from it. We need to proclaim peace to the world. The marriage amendment is another thing that wasn't talked about a lot in the debates today. I'm just going to say I feel like a national marriage amendment is not a federal issue. That is a states' right issue, and I believe that we need to recognize that a federal document is not supposed to keep the federal government out of our lives at a local level. As far as gay marriage, as it should be dealt with by the state, that's for states to decide. Utah's done wonderful things with that. We've already passed amendments with that. I see that my time's up. Please vote Phil for Congress. That's my blog. You can visit it, and please email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hallman. I'd just like to acknowledge all three of our candidates who've just spoken. They have stayed here during the entire Republican debate to have this small segment to be able to speak and introduce themselves. Thanks for the commitment to the process that would keep you here this afternoon.